quick reminder, loyal listeners, but we do welcome the disloyal. It really helps if you'd like and subscribe on the various platforms. Reviewing too is very helpful. Commenting on YouTube and Spotify, especially welcome. There is this bloke who keeps saying that I need a big pre-season. I'm sure he's a bronzed Adonis himself. Come on, mate, get some new material. Anyway, we've got big plans here. Problem is, we just haven't thought of them yet. But anyway, on with the show. Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, whatever time you've chose to listen to this broadcast. Welcome to the podcast about the least serious of the most important things, as I think Nancy Banks Smith once wrote. The sun shines on glorious England after yet another European success from our glorious Lionesses. This is England. I tell you what, we're actually that comfortable with success story over here. But with that in mind, I'm joined by a Hiberno Spaniard in Miguel Delaney of The Independent, and James Horncastle, an adopted Italian, but he's of The Athletic. I'm John Brewin, often of The Guardian, sometimes elsewhere. I'm just trying to keep this show on the road, to be quite honest. So, with the promise, we'll have a lengthy discussion over the summer transfers to follow, but we must start with the Euros, the Lionesses. Miguel, you were there. You were there in Basel. Your thoughts on the occasion, the game, the whole tournament?
I'm actually in France at the moment, would you believe? But still in Basel. I mean, just over the border. So, if people there might be some sound issues as people have complained about on YouTube. I've been away for 4 weeks. Some of my technology is not working properly because I've been away so long, and I forgot to charge it for them. So hopefully this comes true. Bear
with us, listeners.
Bear with this.
Miguel's connecting via yogurt pots.
I've had to alternate between my 5G, such as it is in here, and the Wi-Fi to get on today. It was mostly a good tournament. Great results for England, obviously. History made all that. Wiegman herself said that sometimes she couldn't believe what was happening. She called it the most chaotic, ridiculous tournament she's ever been involved in. Hard not to agree. England led for 4 minutes of knockout football last night in everything bar the finishing. And actually, to be fair, some of the base defending. Spain were so superior. They had that game gone normally, it should have been quite comfortable, especially in the period after Spain's opening goal from Mariona. But the fact Spain lost it and England eventually won it on penalties, it's not just kind of a freak occurrence. Look, I think it does speak to something deeper there that Wiegman gets, and is why she has won 3 trophies in a row, or 3 Euros in a row, why England have won 2 in a row, which is that there's a bit of a Southgate element in that, whatever about any other questions, she gets the team culture and how important that is for a tournament. And in this, the 2 finalists ended up being kind of 2 showcases, and maybe how you go and you try and win a tournament in the kind of the second quarter of the 21st century now, which is, one is obviously some sort of wider ideology or tactical idea. And the other is, you might call it classic tournament ball, which is adapting to your situations, building the right spirit, which can be rare in international football. It does obviously help that England actually have really talented players, more talented players than most of the field. I think I'd say maybe all about bar 4 teams in this tournament. And that comes from, really significant FA investment in the women's game since 2016. So the FA has reaped the rewards for that. And all of Wiegman, you can have bigger arguments maybe about the style, the manner of it, but Wiegman's taken what she's got. She's, instilled a real spirit into this team. And if, in terms of general play, England don't always look like the more than the sum of their parts. They are more than the sum of their parts, and kind of like the force, and the force behind them, the spirit behind them. Some of the defending around the 6-yard box was amazing last night. And just the fact they really didn't give up. I know it's such a simple thing to say, but it is true right through the tournament. And for that, they are deserving champions. You know, you can make the arguments of play and Spanish superiority and all this, but you know, England made it happen.
James, in the aftermath, and in this game, we received another helping of what's become known as proper England. It was in the commentary from my friend Robin Cowan, and it's in the papers, and it was a big part of the previewing of the final itself. Now, the thing is, patriotism's something that makes us on the liberal left side of things a bit uncomfortable, doesn't it? I'm assuming you're a liberal, despite being from Hull, despite your interest in Italy. But how
John
does...
Prescott.
Yeah, a very liberal man. Yes. The thing is, we see other countries show off this patriotism, don't we, in these great big moments. I remember, actually, there's a piece I wrote for Jonathan's Blizzard magazine a few years back about how I went to a Japan-Paraguay game, and it's the worst game I've ever been to, but you could see the national fervour there. And I thought we in England have a bit to be embarrassed about, a lot to be embarrassed about, but there is still something of Englishness to celebrate. And I think one of the problems of, say, Keir Starmer's Labour Party is trying to be a patriot while not seeming like you're trying to steal Reform's act. And this proper England thing, it feeds into that type of thing, doesn't it? It's like we don't want to bring... It's about how Englishness just isn't the far right. It isn't just wars. It's about something else. And that the players kept repeating it. Miguel, you might have something to say about this in a minute. What's your view on that, James?
Well, I mean, from the reaction that I've seen over the last 12 hours or so, it doesn't seem to have been hijacked by the right in any way. In I suppose
They possibly don't care about women's football.
Well, yeah, I think that there perhaps is an element of that. It doesn't suit their agenda. But, you know, throughout this tournament, I think that nationalism, or however you want to talk about it, has been almost channeled in a sort of jingoistic, but very kind of supportive sort of togetherness. That has been the main thing for me. It's like how, not elements of the print media, but certainly the broadcast media, when we've been following the tournament, it has been very, very supportive of England, which on the one hand creates quite a nice fuzzy feeling, which there does seem to have been this ride of positivity around England, which, you know, we as a nation need right now. But at the same time, you know, Mick, you've been in these press conferences where I think some of the players have talked about being criticised and have been not prickly about it, but felt like they've come under attack. Where, you know, I think on a more broader spectrum, I haven't felt that. Granted, I'm not one of them.
I do wonder. Well, there's maybe two elements to that. Obviously, I think this is a thing that's evolving in modern sport. And yes, I'm going to make a comparison to the men's game because it is the primary game I cover. So I'll naturally have a lot of touchdowns. But Jude Bellingham last summer got on about the haters. This is the point when he was like the English national hero. No one was saying anything about him, but he was talking about. So I do wonder how much kind of modern players actually kind of manufacture this sort of thing. I haven't seen stuff like The Last Dance. There is potentially another side, which is a lot of these players have become kind of cultural icons. Certainly for certain sections of the country. We're not maybe talking about the right who we derided a moment ago and their attitudes to the women's game. But the cultural people did talk about egos developing in the squad, and maybe in that context, any sort of kind of critical discussion they can perceive as. But also, you shouldn't overlook it. They're terrible in the first game, and they've gone into the tournament with a host of issues, not least from the retirements and all that. And the story tournament is coming back from adversity. I think the media coverage was fair, I'd say, and there were occasionally moments of tension between the pack and the camp, as happens, especially when you're away for for 4 weeks. But on the proper England thing, it was funny actually. So someone, one or two people actually who were um around, who basically have a knowledge of inside the base. They even messaged me saying this is an interesting one. They've said it so often throughout the tournament, particularly now, that it almost feels like concerted messaging. Especially I know so the proper England thing did come from basically, I think, get back to basics and a bit of grit, which we did see in the game.
Mm.
But it did feel like kind of went to maybe another stage. Although as John as raised there, an Irish friend of mine who actually John knows as well, who maybe his politics are more of the centre. He did. We were discussing this last night, and he said to me, "It does feel sometimes like this is an Irishman who lives in London. It does feel like sometimes a bit like the only country that's not really allowed to discuss patriotism or nationality is England."
Yeah, yeah.
Because it does develop this proper dimension. And even I suppose the point was made to me, you know, anytime with Irish success, it literally always said proud to be Irish, Irish spirit and all this. I mean, well, actually, the Spanish one would have been interesting because there's obviously such a Catalan dimension in the team. A lot of the media around it are, because the players are Barcelona based, who would not necessarily be obviously Spanish leaning. So maybe it would have been seen in a different context that Spain actually won. But yeah, I suppose it is fascinating how this is what tournaments do as well. Throw up these sort of moments that, apart from celebration, also for kind of one of these rare moments of clarity almost that force a bit of discussion about what national identity is at that point in time.
Yeah, this is one thing I've thought during this tournament, during the Lionesses success, and I was writing about this yesterday, is that in men's football, the English team is used to this decades of misery, of failure, whereas the women's team in the last decade, it's been a success story, and we're not used to it. And so they are able to push a different, more positive identity forward, aren't they? It's a
Yeah.
and that in itself is one of the very, very interesting things about the Lionesses' success. And to talk about let's talk about some other things on that it's also brought out this tournament. I mean, you talk about the proper English defending. I think it's Millie Bright, isn't it, that came up with that idea. She wasn't part of the tournament, but who embodied that most in that game? Probably Jess Carter, the player who had been so criticised and had dealt with those horrific, racist abuse on the internet. And we've got this. It's funny. The world has changed because these days now, in recent days, the UK Online Safety Act has come in, and that's meant those people that weren't watching the Lionesses will have had to prove their age to log into certain other websites. And what it does mean is that the online companies are, by British law, supposed to act on this. So maybe, as part of what happened to Jess Carter, there's going to be a sea change in that. We hope so, because, online abuse and racism has become a part of almost tournament football as well, which is pretty regrettable, I would have to say. Another point I was going to make, during the broadcast, and I don't know if you chaps saw this, we also saw how far women's football has come, and ITTV did a very poignant piece about and showed some footage from the 1970s of how women's football was covered. So there's a sort of guy laughing at the attendance of a game. We have Rodney Marsh saying women should be making his tea. And then we had someone, all three of us did know, Brian Glanville, being very dismissive of the women's game. We all knew Brian and enjoyed his company, but that didn't really travel well. And in the moments after that, we saw how far the game has come since then. And I felt that was especially poignant, and well done to ITV for doing that. Women's football is a success story in this country. We have to say that, don't we?
Oh yeah,
Yeah, undoubtedly. And I think, even to go back to the performances, I do think the resilience that they showed comes from a kind of winning begets winning mentality,
Yeah.
you
Yeah,
know,
100%.
which is something obviously that the men's national team doesn't have, hasn't had, and you know I think there have been moments in all of these knockout games where England have looked on the brink, have had moments in those games where they've looked completely out of the game, and yet they've always been able to find a way back. And uh, you know, I do think it's played into a lot of things that we like as a nation. You know, I mean, even to go back to that kind of proper Englishness or whatever, I think we do like this kind of backs against the wall. You know, come through adversity, show resilience, blitz spirit kind of stuff, rather than, you know, if we were just playing neat and tidy, very clean football like Spain. I think we would prefer to win in the way that we won than any other way. You know, it speaks to a lot of the things that we like about national identity, and they are a great expression of it. Yeah, so yeah, it's you know it's very interesting how this momentum is going to just keep on rolling on now, because you know it is very rare in all sports to be able to retain trophies from major tournaments which are spaced out over a couple of 4 years. You know, it's something that's very difficult to do, and you know it is genuinely historic in that sense. And you know it makes me now. Yeah, this debate was already had a couple of years ago, but like you know, Wiegman's place within the FA. You know, at what stage does Thomas Tuchel going out of a group stage in the US raise again the conversation about Wiegman being a prospective replacement for Thomas Tuchel with the men's team? Because again, you look at these. I think Miguel touched upon it, but a lot of tournament football is about setting the culture and defining mentality. It's not necessarily about having a playing style or what the data nerds call a game model these days. It is still a very human game, and it's defined by elements of humanity rather than stuff that's
Yeah.
put on a tactics board. And she is clearly very gifted when it comes to establishing that within a group. Yeah, even going back to the choices that she made before the tournament, in being upfront and telling players, this is what the pecking order is. What do you think? And obviously, some withdrew, some retired. Yeah, that's real leadership. That is, which translates across sports industries, whatever. So yeah, incredible.
On that as well, I mean, it's like interesting when you talk about kind of the human qualities, and so yeah, again, the flip side, I suppose, you look at the Spanish approach, which is, I suppose, it's mostly process basically, and process. If you do that over the course of a league season, as we've seen, say with Pep Guardiola's City, it's going to get you over the line because you win 80% of your games or whatever, and it will probably give you the best chance in tournaments because you'll have more of the ball, you'll create more chances, as we saw with Spain. But it does also slightly. Now, this isn't to. I mean, Spain are world champions, so there could be an element that just kind of this is the way it falls sometimes. But even if you do that, it can leave you open. And this is the problem with the Spain's men team, basically from 2012 to 2014, or sorry, 2024, in between their two Euros victories. They almost became too obsessed with process until they eventually updated it, got new players through, and maybe developed something else. But as Argentina showed in the 2022 World Cup, it's exactly that. Like tournament games, they really are like they become, especially once it goes past half time in a tournament match, and like it's still in the balance, and you got that tension. It really does come down to just finding a way to get over. They have a really different kind of psychology than I'd even say to Champions League two-legged knockouts. And Wiegman's been a master at that. And actually, just to pick up on the wider point there as well. Um, I think it's hugely important for actually the development of the women's. I know this is said after every single women's moment, but just before this tournament, there'd been a 30% drop in broadcasting figures for WSL. There are suddenly questions within the FA and the wider women's football infrastructure about how they think once this team cycle is finished, they could have a cycle where suddenly the quality drops off before. Like I was speaking to people in UEFA about this. They expect England in 10, 15 years to suddenly have this absolute explosion of talent, a little bit like in the men's game, because they've invested so much in 2016. But if there is to be a bit of a lull, it suddenly makes this all important. Because look, we were talking to Mark Bullingham last week. The FA chief executive was speaking about it with Wiegman throughout the tournament. Like there is, obviously success propels interest. And I think that's especially true in the women's game, because we discussed this on the podcast before, because for the moment, and probably for the next, it's medium-term future, it looks like it's probably going to be something like rugby, where it's big events and massive events, but then it's got like in between, it can't sustain that interest. And you can see it in this tournament, even like among the internet numbers, among the TV viewing figures, the group stage, people weren't that engaged. As soon as they got to the knockouts, we were talking about national events. And wait till you see the figures for Sunday night. What, the semi-final was ITV's biggest audience this year?
Yeah. Yeah, and it's been a huge event as that momentum's gone on. And, after that France loss, there was a sort of, it's not going to be the same as it was before, but it's been the same but better in a way, hasn't it? The drama has been unmatchable, really. Unmatchable by the other summer tournament we've discussed all summer. I was going to ask you about that, Miguel. I understand Alexander Seferin did make an appearance here, having been not quite as visible as Don Gianni was during his own little tournament. What do we make of that? Actually, here's a question I don't know the answer to. Was Gianni there?
Yeah, no, actually, I don't think he was. Grafstrom was there, his Secretary General, who was at 5 games. I think FIFA were very keen to show that. So Seferin, the president of UEFA, based in Nyon, whose, of course, base is a 15-minute train from Geneva, where England's semi-final was. He attended 2 games, the opening and the final. And he didn't go to the official dinner on Saturday night. He came into back into Basel yesterday at about 10 a.m. and left about 10 p.m. because we friends of the podcast were at the official UEFA drinks or party after the final, and Grafstrom was still there, but Seferin wasn't to be seen. It does. There are questions, of course, about attitude to the women's game there. Because there are little things in that sense, and I know people will dwell on us here for for being fixated in the media, but I think this does actually speak to something. So in a lot of games, for some big England games, one was in St. Gallen. Now England in a big tournament game could fill at least 40,000 stadium. Now obviously the tournament organisers can't take that into consideration. They have to have a certain balance, but there's a huge media interest for some of those games. They just use the normal press box in St. Gallen, so publications can only have one representative for an England tournament game. Now, where that's important is for a men's game, UEFA don't use the normal press boxes. They basically just kind of occupy an entire section of a stand, put in new desks, and basically, there's 300 journalists at a game, whatever. Added to that, journalists at these games didn't have TVs for replays because we were told there wasn't a budget for them. That's beyond question in a men's game. Me and James discussed this. They didn't even have a tournament song, which of course is absolutely that is a given for a men's tournament. They use the tournament. They use the song, the little theme from the Euro 2008, which is also in Switzerland and Austria. It was my first tournament. And they use a little kind of this, little kind of soft techno number that was, I think, made by one of the members of Faithless. But that's still going now.
I mean, this is a disgrace, actually, Mick. I'm glad you brought this up because, Gianni has spent all summer basically saying, here's Robbie Williams, the music ambassador of the Club World Cup. Here's Laura Pausini. She'll be joining him. Oh, by the way, we've got Pitbull doing something, and we've got another official song. Like, it was just almost trying to get so many music acts going, and the Seth, just clearly not into it.
That media thing's interesting, isn't it? I mean, you're absolutely right about men's games. I've ever been at the 2007 Champions League final in Athens, and a Liverpool fan came up to me and said, is that the press bit, mate? And I said, yeah. And he goes, you practically got the cop. Like this because of the size of it, like because he couldn't believe how many journalists were there, and you know what, he was right, because
I think from the 2010 World Cup final, remember when they dimmed the lights before Shakira came on, and I took a little video of the press box, and it's like that scene in The Matrix where they pull out and you see all the pods, because it's just all this kind of this luminescent light that goes on for ages. That'll be under threat in the age of all these seats won't be taken by press anymore. They'll be taken by influencers and content creators. So maybe we should be grateful for our 3 benches in St. Gallen.
Yeah, another note of doom to end part 1 of Libero podcast. There, we'll be back after the break, and we'll be talking Alexander. Okay, on with the show. Back at part 2, because football rolls on and on and on, and so does the transfer business. We're speaking just after Liverpool have agreed to sell Luis Diaz to Bayern Munich, and we think, and it's widely reported, this paves the way for Liverpool to make a move for Alexander Isak. Now, this is a deal that is, I suppose, the big daddy deal of the summer. If this comes off, this could shift several sands. But let's start with you, Miguel. What's your view on this deal? Is it possible?
Yeah, it is possible. I now increasingly think it will happen. There's been a few little murmurs out of Liverpool themselves that... Now, this has been a bit of a theme in the summer. It's been a bit of a theme of some summers, actually, where Liverpool will tell you what's happening to a certain degree. Like, I remember thinking 2017 or 2018, whatever it was when they signed Alisson. And I had a line that they were going to sign Alisson months before, and they denied it. Or at least they denied details in it that you could look like it wasn't going to happen. Then, of course, months later, it happens. So at the moment, it does feel like from within Liverpool, there's almost been an element of playing down Isak. Sorry. That has been picked up, my pronunciation of that elsewhere.
Okay, fine.
Sometimes you read a word for the first time, and that your mental reception of it ends up being what stays with you. But yeah, there's been an element of playing down Isak, but they're obviously interested. I mean, I did think that story dropped on Thursday that Isak it was from Craig Hope, a friend of ours. That he was exploring options, or told Newcastle he wanted to explore options. We were actually in the middle of a Mark Bullingham press briefing at the time, which caused some consternation with some of those in the room, specifically covering Newcastle. We wanted to get out of it as quickly as possible, then chase it. But the thing about that story dropped then, but it's obviously true that Newcastle, Liverpool, and other potential suitors have basically known about Isak's situation for months. This goes back, I think, to the start of June. So that's where we have a public chronology of this, and then this kind of the actual chronology of what's happening. And it's where it doesn't necessarily go cause effect that Newcastle know that Isak wants to leave, so then Liverpool come in. I think there's much more back and forth to it. I think we have to look at the Ekitike signing within that context, but I do think it does just feel so much is aligning or so much is eventually going to align maybe for a late deal to be done for Isak. And I think that's absolutely it. They'll sell Diaz. They'll most likely sell Darwin, and they could sell Elliott too. And then suddenly you've got a lot of space, you've got a lot of room to make the signing, and just an opportunity presents as well. And it's I do wonder whether Liverpool would actually have preferred to sign Isak when Salah goes, because he's almost kind of an obvious successor in that sense. But sometimes you've got to do it when it happens. And yeah, at the moment, if ask my gut, I think Isak goes to Liverpool at the end of the window. Maybe Newcastle go and do Sesko. But it's yeah, you're right. This is a potentially defining moment for next year's Premier League, because I mean, I think Arsenal have built quite steadily. Their squad is in a good place, especially if they get Eberechi, which I think they will. City have rebuilt again. Chelsea suddenly have a newly stacked squad, but like even before Isak, Wirtz felt like it brings Liverpool onto another level again, given the champions. So for Isak to be added to that, you are talking about a clear leader and potentially Liverpool retaining a title for the first time since 1984. And as for Newcastle, then I mean, because I've been hearing a lot about this the last few weeks. A lot of Newcastle fans think I hate the club because of my views in the ownership. I don't. But so to say they might bristle at some of what I've heard about. There's a lot of murmurs about what, like the direction of the place within the club. It's not what you would expect from a club that has got back into the Champions League and has wider ambitions. And I think that element of drift, how they can't seem to get signings done, that's one of many reasons why Isak wants to go.
Yeah, I mean, there was that quote, wasn't there, from Alan Shearer talking about how if Newcastle should settle for north of 150 million, and then Eddie Howe is going to have to use his persuasive powers to get in. And well, you actually look at the amount of players that Newcastle have tried to sign this season. Doesn't look as though those persuasive powers are that strong at the moment. They've missed out on a hell of a lot of players, coupled to Manchester United, of course, in Cunha and Mbeumo, who you would have thought Champions League football, it's there for you. But instead, they're going to a club that is, as we've discussed at length, an absolute mess. It's been a very frustrating summer for Newcastle. And then at the end of it, as you said, and it does look like this saga will go on for a while, you lose your star man, the man that won them the League Cup final, the one that took them out of this, took them into the promised land. If you're a Newcastle fan, you'd be fairly pessimistic about the future. What do you think about that, James?
Well, I think everyone's focused on the structure or apparent lack of it. They've only just announced the technical director.
Yeah.
They've got more appointments to make. And I mean, what I found interesting over the last few days has been how, people have been pointing at the Amanda Staveley-sized hole that has been left at Newcastle and how Lady Staveley's touch has been missing. But, I mean, while she did have a vision for Newcastle and, they went out and signed some very good players. I mean, they spent more than 400 million net in 2.5 years. And then spent this time last year, sort of going into June 30th, having to do, Forest, you take Elliot Anderson, we'll take Vlachodimos, your goalkeeper.
And players.
And we'll send Minte to Brighton. And so, some of the things that are limiting Newcastle are, we've talked about PSR. Again, I think some of the coverage, some of the way the fans look at the position Newcastle are in, they think the rules are stacked against them, that they're there to essentially protect the top six. But, I think, they've spent more than Liverpool over the last 2.5 years. The thing that really stands out to me about the last few weeks with Liverpool in particular, going back to them, if they were to sign Isak, is they would spend as a minimum, let's say, 430 million gross in one transfer window, right? I mean, the fact that they're signing Ugo Ekitike, you then got the prospect of Isak coming in. You've got your lads Frimpong and Kirkes, who people seem to have forgotten about that they've signed.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a Paris Saint-Germain style transfer window. This is like 2017 PSG signing Mbappe and Neymar, or it's when they initially got the Luis Enrique batch of players in a couple of years ago when they went for Kolo Muani for 90 million, Barcola and all that sort of thing. Now, obviously, they are balancing the books to some extent. Selling Kwanzaa, Kelleher, getting that 10 million so Trent could play in the Club World Cup. Diaz, maybe Darwin money. We'll have to see. I look at it, there'd still be sort of mid 200 millions net in a transfer. I mean, I find that staggering given the mythology around how Liverpool go about their business, sort of, not wanting to spend too much, resale, sabermetrics, FSG, Brad Pitt, all that sort of stuff. But because the thing is, if you put all of this money in your Isaks, your Wirtzes, and that sort of thing, like people say it's like Van Dijk all over again, but they put so much money in Van Dijk that when Van Dijk got injured, they couldn't defend their title. And it's the same thing will happen here. Like if Wirtz gets injured, like what did they do? If Isak gets injured, what did they do? Like they're putting so many eggs in like one player baskets. It's remarkable.
But Rory always makes this point that who's kind of closer to Liverpool than the rest of us, that they have their normal budget, which is essentially the kind of the analytics budget, signings like Frimpong. And then they have a kind of a budget that they will allow if the right player becomes available and can take them to the next level. And they've kind of had a constant balance that over the FSG ownership. And it's interesting, like the two clubs involved in this represent contrasts in many days. One of them being the ownership. And we're talking about, I suppose, the two dominant models that are now kind of driving football. One being broken at its base, an American or Western capitalist ownership. But I have all sorts of questions about that myself. And I think FSG have made some decisions which illustrate where they've had to apologise for in terms of kind of ticket price, in terms of the Super League, that obviously show bigger ambitions. Ironically, they've been criticised by Liverpool fans for other elements like not spending money. But this is where I suppose they've more aligned with the pure football side in that they've obviously put together one of the best recruitment models in the game. And it's interesting that this has now this recruitment model has enjoyed what obviously seems a particular escalation since Klopp's departure. Because we've all heard the talk since then. Michael Edwards came back once. Michael Edwards was empowered to build this new structure again. Now that Klopp had gone, Liverpool, I suppose, to be fair, they did go 3 windows without spending anything other than Chiesa. And what we are seeing now is, from what I gather, the kind of the delay. It's the second. This summer was supposed to be the second half of Arne Slot's initial overhaul of particularly the forward line. He wanted to do it last summer, but they decided to wait for all sorts of reasons. The market, a new manager coming in, the situation at the time. So now we're almost seeing it all at once, both in terms of the money they can spend and obviously the timing. And on the other side, of course, you've got the Newcastle ownership. It's sports washing. It's the Saudi state. Although it's interesting because it now suddenly feels such a kind of an adjunct to this separate thing to the wide. Like it does feel so different to the rest of the Saudi policy, which is so brash. It's all about the biggest thing. It's also more about bringing money, talent, resources into Saudi rather than necessarily elsewhere. Hence the Saudi Pro League, especially in the long build up to 2034. And just compared to Liverpool's recruitment model, say, I mean, look at Newcastle. So Paul Mitchell, who was sporting director, he has left. I think he's on gardening leave now. They have been, from what I gather, interviewing people throughout that time. At the moment, the most powerful people in the club, and I know people within the club talk about how he's got so much power now, are Howe and the staff around him. I was also taught it's interesting how there's this vacuum at that level, but then I've also heard stories about how previously there has been frustration because of the amount of time it takes deals to get done, because it has to go up through the kind of the Saudi power structures around the club. That can slow. That's one reason why they've missed out on so many names. And suddenly there's just this sense of drift about them, especially this was supposed to be this is supposed to be the summer that push them up to a new level. They got into the Champions League for the second time. They had players or still have players like Isak, Guimaraes. It looked like they're going to keep them because they got into the Champions League, and instead it's just almost this kind of total regression or reversion. And to that, let's not forget, previously they struggled with partly because they didn't have the depth, partly because of their approach. They struggled with a full European Champions League season. Now they might have that again, but after a summer where they've really struggled to add depth to the squad. So I think Howe suddenly having done a good job so far, Howe's got a big job this year.
Yeah, I think we'd all agree that Eddie Howe's done a good job at Newcastle, despite many people's doubts and misgivings along the way. But the results speak for themselves. Two qualifications for the Champions League, a trophy, but this is a test, you have to say. Interesting what James said there. Yeah, I was reading that Liverpool need to sell 7 players, I think, to get in Isak. Now, that's... I mean, some of those players are fringe players, like, your Tyler Morton or whatever, Ben Doak, that are not really going to play for... But that is a trimming down of the squad, isn't it? Maybe Arne Slot prefers to work with a smaller squad. Arne Slot, checkbook manager. We never thought that, did we? But the thing is with this Isak market and the way that price is going up, and the way it's going to be so seismic. And the fact is that we think because that Newcastle are going to have to plump for Sesko, who's like the odd man out of this transfer market, because, of course, Gyökeres yesterday, or this on Sunday, I should say, confirmed his move to Arsenal. Here's a question. Now that Isak is, in inverted commas, available, is there going to be some buyer's remorse from Arsenal that they didn't go the full gun and go for Isak? I would have thought there might be amongst some supporters, because go back 6 months, there was this idea, wasn't it, that Arsenal would go for Isak?
Yeah, I think there are a couple of things, John. I mean, not to go back over Liverpool again, but I find it really kind of quite funny how, there was so much vitriol, well, maybe not vitriol, but like disappointment with Trent. And yet, in order to sign Isak, they're quite willing to let go of these academy kids who, some of whom are local lads, all to get, Isak. It's like, well, Tyler Morton one day wanted a mural on Anfield Road. He's never going to get that because he's been sacrificed because of, they'll get pure profit for him and all that sort of thing. In terms of buyer's remorse for Isak, I don't think Arsenal would ever go to the money that Newcastle want and Liverpool appear willing to go to for him.
Okay.
And again, I think with Gyökeres, Gyökeres will end up at being like half the price of Isak. And, he's already played a
structured deal as well. Do we understand that? I think that, Miguel, is that right? Yeah.
Yeah, and so I was told on that as well, that Arsenal actually had a hard line this summer of they didn't want to spend more than 65 million on a forward, which goes against a lot of the kind of 18-month talk about how Arsenal absolutely need a number 9. But then I think that's one of the reasons why ultimately they haven't just gone on all in on someone like Isak, because yes, they want a 9, but I think they want a 9 who's an option rather than a certain starter, from what I've been told. And what Arteta really, a little bit like his midfield, why he's become so obsessed with signing so many midfielders, he wants all these sort of kind of multiple possible configurations that he can use depending on the situation. And if you have an absolute certain number 9, maybe that goes against that. Now, to be fair, I think if Arteta had an ideal world, he'd obviously go straight for Isak. He loves him. He thinks he's ideal for him. But he's dealing with a kind of, again, an ownership similar to Liverpool's and the Kroenkes. Probably not as willing to spend, I would say, as Liverpool's. And like from what I'm told, like Arteta has repeatedly tried to get them to push the budget out. They have for this summer. And there's almost in the sense Arsenal are going to spend more now, maybe with the acknowledgement that they won't spend as much next summer because they want. And like, look, it was in some of the talk we got from around the club about the Gyökeres signing. It's a striker for the here and now. And I think that's linked to why Andrea Burt has been brought in as sporting director, someone who can get all these deals done for Arsenal, because he is a kind of, he's more of the kind of traditional kind of wheeling, dealing, contacts, relationships sporting director than necessarily a modern analytics director. There has been a lot of activity in Arsenal. But I suppose this is the other thing about the Isak signing. Arsenal, I think, actually look in a pretty good place right now, and they're all raving about this kid Max Dowman, who's 15, but they're talking about an absolute revelation who's going to play this season, and yet Arteta can suddenly now have a really goodly, nicely set up squad that has a lot of angles, and if Liverpool just bring on Isak, it's just they're on another level, it feels.
So where do we think Sesko goes, or does he remain
Newcastle
in
maybe?
Germany?
I don't rate this guy.
Okay.
No, just because, I don't think he represents value. If we're going to get to like sort of upwards of 50 million, there's talk of like 90 million for him, which I just think is ludicrous when you look at his numbers for Leipzig. They don't justify that. He's not been really anywhere near finishing top scorer in the Bundesliga. In his couple of years there, there've been times where Lois Openda's played instead of him. Yeah, I think the better players or the more decisive players at Leipzig are Xavi Simons and that sort of thing, not Sesko. Sesko seems to be a highlights player. Everyone gets very high on the fact that he's this massive, almost sort of Slovakian Andy Cowell style, guy who can,
Slovenian.
kind of Slovenian, can scored one Van Basten-like goal, and that's it. I honestly don't think this guy's worth it.
That was Andrea Berta's view. Andrea Berta, basically, apparently, he was the one with Arsenal said, we'll go to a certain price with Sesko. We're not going above that. And it was way off what Leipzig wanted. I think, so what I heard there was, right now, they sort of have, their analytics have them around the same level, but Gyökeres is obviously closer to scoring now. I think the question from Arsenal with Sesko was, we might be buying a player for now, but there are elements in his analytics that point to someone who has a massive ceiling in 5 years' time, and maybe we're talking about an Isak in 5 years' time, and could we be missing out on that?
Yeah, I suppose there's that. But I mean, you look at Gyökeres, he's got 85 goals and assists in 2 years. He won the league in a Sporting side, which Sporting lost Ruben Amorim in November. They had 3 coaches in 1 year and still won the double, and that's because the guy was scoring upwards of nearly 50 goals for them. Whereas, Sesko is like, okay, we can talk about the difference between the Bundesliga and the Portuguese league, but the guys have 2 years at Leipzig now. Erling Haaland did not need 2 years at Leipzig to show everyone that, this is, this, or Salzburg, sorry, to show that this is what I'm at. This is where I'm at.
I was going to say, I always felt that the Red Bull model, when they were attracting players, was to say, we can be your next stage, and we won't sell you for that much money. But it appears that they're pricing out this guy.
Yeah.
For I mean, Xavi Simons that James mentioned there, he's linked with Chelsea. I mean, hey, who isn't linked with Chelsea? Even though Chelsea don't like to be linked with people, we're told. But there's a player that, having seen them play this season, clearly stands out. Sesko, to me, didn't stand out, as I've said before on this podcast. The thing is with this great big striker hunt that we've had all summer, that leaves, a club, say, like Manchester United, seeking, if they want a senior striker, if we say they've given up on Rasmus Højlund, who's left? We've got Ollie Watkins, haven't we? He's available, though, pushing on in age. There's a player, we think that he's going to sign for, is it in Turkey? James, Victor Osimhen. Because, he 2 or 3 years ago, this guy was the hottest property in football, and and won Napoli a title. Yeah. Now he's been supplanted by Scott McTominay as the greatest living Neapolitan player.
Yeah, McTomadonna. I mean, Osimhen was the top scorer in Serie A when Napoli won the league for the first time since 1990, and was very, very good in that season. And I hate using terms like this, but a unique profile. He's got a very interesting way of playing in terms of he's got these long limbs, very stretchy, good acceleration. So he can get to balls that seem like lost causes, score headers, just all rounder, but very brittle. Always at AFCON, and this is the thing that people forget going into this season when they talk about FIFA Pro versus FIFA, too many games, congestion. There's AFCON in January between now and the World Cup, which if you've got if you're going to pay a lot of money for a striker, and you're a Premier League club where you've got, you're playing over Boxing Day, New Year, you've got FA Cup 4th round, and now you've got Champions League phase as well. All of a sudden, the striker you're putting, let's say 75 million into, not including wages, he's away for a month, 6 weeks. It's a big problem for sort of Premier League teams when they consider where to allocate their resources. That said, it's still a big surprise that the guys, sort of decided that, having had a loan at Galatasaray, okay, lads, if you can stump up the money, I will sign on a permanent basis for you. for 75 million, which, yeah, that will likely happen this week. I mean, he is one of the strikers. You would have thought that Newcastle, if they were panicking, they would be like, okay, what do we do here? Let's go try and get Osimhen. Or, yeah, there's even like someone like Alvaro Morata. Morata, who this time last year was Spain's European Championship winning captain, about to join Como. You've got, your Kolo Muani's out there, who PSG spent 90 million on. Yeah, there are strikers out there for Newcastle and others to go for. I mean, even going back to Osimhen, John, like 75 million. Okay, I've laid out all the reasons why that's not a deal to do, because he'll be away and he's quite injury prone. But it's still it's considerably less money than Leipzig are asking for Sesko, and less money than Isak is going or Ekitike is going for. So yeah, it's one of the curveballs of the summer transfer window.
We've got Evan Ferguson, who's clearly about to go on the brink of a 50-goal season.
Well, that's true. We've good luck to Evan out there. I'm sure
5 goals and two friendlies
against Congleton Town or someone. Yeah, but I mean, it was
as James pointed out to me everybody though. Gasperini is particularly good at and apparently this was a point in Ferguson's choice, and despite how difficult he's had it for the last year and a half, especially with fitness issues, he still had a fair bit of kind of higher level Premier League interest this summer. But he went for Gasperini because Gasperini kind of explained exactly what his model to kind of make him a better forward is going to be.
Well, okay, well, yeah. I was going to ask you about the other end of the pitch, Miguel. Liverpool again, linked with a central defender. I mean, as James said, the spending continues. It's funny, isn't it? I mean, we've all seen the complaints, and the Manchester City operative saying, if this was us, you'd give. But we all are aware of PSR headroom and all this stuff, and Liverpool is run responsibly on those lines, we believe. Mark Guay was one that was at the start of the transfer window. We just wonder what's going to happen there. I mean.
That's so. Because I've reported on this before about Liverpool's potential interest in Guehi, and for about a year, I'd say the club have denied it, and almost kind of in some cases, people in the club have kind of gone out of the way. That's not one for us. Right. So I have to say, it would certainly represent a U-turn, given everything's been put to us. If they did go from this summer, but yeah, also for all the talk about Isak, the one obvious gap in the squad now is another centre half.
Yeah, Arne Slot was talking about that, wasn't he, after the friendly in Hong Kong, saying, we've got players that can play that, and would you go through? You get Joe Gomez as being decent there. You've got the Japanese player Endo, who has actually quite a good centre half, despite not being the tallest player in the game, and. Yeah, he seems to be settling for that, though. You would have thought that you would want a senior defender. They just appeared to let Konate go, didn't they? That is an interesting one. It does appear that Liverpool might be quite front-loaded if they don't get a central defender.
Great entertainers.
Great, well, yeah. I mean, it's true. I mean,
great spenders, great entertainers.
Great spenders, great endertainers. They're the new Manchester United. There we go. I mean, it's a. Okay, to conclude, any flyers in the transfer window that either of you two fancy? Sure. Any surprises? Any clubs that you think need to make the move? I mean, hit the move over the weekend, we all thought was going to happen. Morgan Gibb White's at Tottenham, that was closed down in spectacular style by. Hey, we always get that from Big Vange, but it was. It was we thought that deal was going to happen.
The pageantry around that was spectacular.
Fantastic, wasn't it?
Extended really in modern Premier League football. Insane.
You've got to say he's a character. Anything that you fancy? We've still. We took him Real Madrid or across the continent even. What
Madrid's still want a midfielder, don't they? So there's not much out there. Barca have no money. Will PSG do something else?
Well, I mean that was the thing when everyone was doing the kind of Isak, okay, where can he go to? PSG were the only club on the continent that you could say have a need because they don't really play with strikers. Kolomuani looks like he's on the market. Juventus tried to sign him on a permanent. I imagine he'll figure in some of the Isak succession planning as well at Newcastle. And then they've got Gonzalo Ramos, who no one really seems to be too persuaded by. So if they wanted to, you could say, that's they could go for a striker. But I can completely understand why they say they're probably looking around and saying, "Nah, guys, we're good." There's just not much money on the continent, really isn't, and I think that's why I was keen to point out the gross spend that Liverpool have had, which if they do sign Isak is getting into the mid 400s. You look at how much Arsenal have spent. Chelsea have been relatively quiet by the standards of the league and themselves. And I did wonder whether this spending that we're seeing from Arsenal and Liverpool is a kind of consequence of how Chelsea have gone about their business over the last few years. And then, Enzo Maresca showing his medals. This is the winning model.
But on that as well, one of the themes of last season, of course, was the rise of the middle classes. And some of the Premier League's best players been at the middle classes. It feels like this summer we're seeing actually, the Empire striking back, push back, because suddenly a lot of those players are going to move on. Maybe the chief among them, despite Newcastle's ownership, being Isak. But we're seeing two of the Bournemouth guys. A lot of Brentford players potentially. Taking
it as a
Easy and Isak.
Yeah.
Easy.
But yeah, we see the middle class is being trampled on. Maybe to bring us back full circle from the initial start of the podcast about whether the right wing is taking on identity politics.
Yeah, well, I was going to say one deal I had an eye on earlier in the transfer window. I don't know, is Emi Martinez moving on from Aston Villa. There's a great big gaping hole at Manchester United. Obviously, their goalkeeper's out for quite a lot at the start of the season. You do wonder if that move would happen. Because Villa are a club that sell to buy. That's how they do things with Monchi, isn't it?
Well, yeah, and the other surprise is Donnarumma as well at the moment. Donnarumma is about to go into the final year of his contract.
Oh, okay.
It seems that Paris Saint-Germain look like they're going to sign Chevalier from Lille. And so what does he do? Does he... he has interest. Yeah, there are obviously a number of Premier League clubs that have a goalkeeper need. You've mentioned United. And so, I think that's one to watch between now... not necessarily him and Man United, but Donnarumma's future, I think, is one to watch between now and the end of the transfer window.
One final one from you, Miguel.
With the modern transfer window now, everything is flagged so far in advance that
Sure.
you can come up and then report it on in incremental details. The one thing I was thinking as you said that there, the value of selling has been massive this summer. Who can sell well, who can't? It's obviously now suddenly so crucial to your business model. And I think it's possibly something actually we should do a podcast on, the whole issue of selling, right up to the debate about whether actually Newcastle should just go, yeah, give us all your money for Isak, because now we can just build a completely new team and fill in areas you need. And the classic example I always think of this, we've obviously got the most recent one of Mbappe at Paris Saint-Germain, but you'd be closer for James. Juventus being so willing to sell Zidane in 2001, even though they're one of the continent's premier clubs, and they immediately went out and signed 3 players, including Trezeguet, to go and win the title and actually dominate Italy for the next, until Calciopoli put an end to that.
Yeah, I do think that is maybe this is one final thought for the podcast is at Newcastle, I imagine if Isak goes, the temptation will be to sign a striker who is not worth the same as Liverpool pay for him, but there'll be some, like, we need to go and get a £90 million striker now, or a £100 million striker. In some respects, the trap Barca fell into after Barca sold Neymar in terms of like, okay, right, we need to get a Dembele or a Coutinho and that sort of thing. Whereas, yeah, the real blueprint to go to is, yeah, Mig was talking about PSG after Mbappe, but yeah, Juve every year when they reached 3 Champions League finals in the 90s would sell Vialli, sell Ravanelli, sell Vieri, and then of course, sold Zidane at the end, and always used that to make their squad not only deeper, but that quality in depth better as well. And so, yeah, don't panic. I mean, it would help, I suppose, if they had a fully fledged out structure that could make these decisions rather than all resting on the hows.
Well, the good news is that there's still well over a month of the transfer window to come, so plenty more of this talk. But let's close it there. Thanks to James, thanks to Miguel, thanks to producer Tom as ever. Email us at liberopodcast0@gmail.com. Like, subscribe, all that. Let's say goodbye. Let's say goodbye from proper England.
And proper Switzerland in France.
Proper sort of France in Switzerland, isn't it? I think is that where you are, and proper Italy in Hull from James Horncastle. So thanks very much for joining us. We really do appreciate you listening. All the best. Bye bye.